The final bell rang through the elementary school hallway, sharp and bright, and the building instantly filled with noise. Classroom doors opened all at once, and children spilled out into the corridor, backpacks bumping against small shoulders, voices overlapping in excited bursts. Teachers stood by their doors, offering reminders and gentle goodbyes as the current of students flowed toward the exits. Daniel Brooks waited near the first grade wing, scanning the familiar chaos with practiced patience. He had learned over the past 2 months how to stand still in places that felt too loud, too alive, as if the world had not noticed that something essential was missing from his own life. He adjusted the strap of his briefcase on his shoulder and leaned slightly to look into the classroom. Emma was still inside. She sat at her desk, carefully placing her notebooks into her backpack, tongue pressed lightly against her lower lip in concentration. When she looked up and saw him, her face lit up instantly. "Dad," she called, waving both hands. "You're early." Daniel smiled and stepped inside. "Just a little," he said. "Take your time." She hurried anyway, zipping her bag with unnecessary force and hopping down from her chair. As she reached him, she tilted her head back proudly, eyes shining. "Guess what? I got another a today." "I'm not surprised," Daniel said, crouching slightly to her level. "What was it for?" "My poem," Emma replied, already breathless with excitement. "The one we practiced on Sunday. I didn't forget a single line. Mrs. Thompson said I said it the best in the class." She cleared her throat dramatically and began to recite, her voice serious and careful, hands clasped behind her back. Daniel listened, nodding along, offering quiet encouragement with his eyes. When she finished, she waited expectant. "That was perfect," he said. "Exactly like we practiced." Emma grinned. "I knew it. I'm going to tell Mom when she gets home." The words landed softly but with weight. Daniel felt them settle in his chest, heavy and familiar. He kept his smile steady, smoothing a loose strand of hair away from her face. "She'll be very proud," he said. They walked out together, past the emptying classrooms and toward the front doors. Outside, the late afternoon air was cool and clear. The sky over Portland a pale blue streaked with thin clouds. Parents gathered near the curb, calling out names, opening car doors, waving. Emma skipped beside him as they crossed the parking lot. "Mrs. Thompson says I might get to read another poem at the assembly next month," she said. "Do you think Mom will be back from the hospital by then?" Daniel's steps slowed almost imperceptibly. He opened the car door for her and waited until she climbed inside before answering. "I hope so," he said quietly. "She's resting and getting stronger. That's the most important thing." Emma nodded, accepting the explanation easily, the way children often accept the version of the world given to them by someone they trust. "Hospitals take a long time," she said thoughtfully, "but that's okay. I can wait." Daniel closed the door and walked around to the driver's side. As he started the engine, his hands tightened on the steering wheel. The familiar ache pressed in again, the constant question he carried with him every day. How much longer could he keep protecting her from the truth? And at what cost? They drove in comfortable silence for a few blocks. Emma hummed softly, swinging her feet, watching the houses pass by. Daniel glanced at her in the rearview mirror, taking in the curve of her cheek, the way her brow creased slightly when she was thinking. She looked so much like her mother that some days it felt unbearable. "I have a meeting later," he said finally, "but I thought we could stop by the park for a little while first. Just half an hour." Emma gasped. "Really? Even on a school day?" "Just this once." She clapped her hands. "Yes, I'll feed the birds, and maybe the swings, and—" She stopped herself, smiling up at him. "Thanks, Dad." Daniel nodded, keeping his eyes on the road. On the surface, everything felt normal, almost peaceful. But beneath it all, the truth waited unspoken. stretching thin the fragile calm he was trying so desperately to preserve. The park was quiet in the way only an autumn afternoon could be. Tall trees lined the walking paths, their leaves turning shades of gold and rust, drifting down slowly with each passing breeze. The air carried the faint scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. A few people sat on benches with coffee cups in their hands, while others walked dogs or pushed strollers along the gravel paths. Daniel and Emma entered through the side gate. Almost immediately, Emma broke free from his hand and ran ahead, her backpack bouncing lightly against her back. "Dad, look," she called. "They're all here today." She crouched near a patch of ground where pigeons gathered, pulling crumbs from a small paper bag she had saved from lunch. The birds fluttered closer, bold and impatient. Emma laughed, scattering crumbs with wide, careless motions. Daniel watched from a short distance, hands in his coat pockets, letting the moment stretch longer than he probably should have. Work could wait a few more minutes. Emma moved from one spot to another, chasing a leaf as it skidded across the path, then hopping up onto the edge of a low stone border. She glanced back occasionally, making sure he was still watching, then ran ahead again, her energy boundless. She slowed suddenly. Daniel saw it happen before he understood why. Emma stopped near the main path, her body going very still. A woman was walking toward them alone, head lowered, one hand resting protectively over her rounded belly. Her coat was thin and worn, her shoes scuffed at the toes. She looked tired, as if each step required careful effort. Emma stared at her for a heartbeat. Then her face changed completely. "Mom," Emma said. Before Daniel could react, Emma ran forward. She reached the woman and wrapped her arms around her waist without hesitation, pressing her cheek against the fabric of the coat. "Mom!" she cried again, her voice bursting with joy. "You're back!" The woman froze, her breath caught sharply, and she looked down in shock, eyes wide, hands hovering uncertainly at her sides. Emma pulled back just enough to look up at her face, grinning. "I knew it was you," Emma said. "You look better. Dad said you were getting stronger." She fumbled with her backpack, fingers clumsy with excitement, and pulled out her school diary. "Look," she said, thrusting it forward. "I got all A's. I practiced my poem just like you taught me. I wanted to show you first." The woman stared at the diary, then at Emma, then beyond her, as if searching for help. Daniel was already moving toward them, his heart pounding. "I'm sorry," the woman said softly, her voice unsteady. I think you've made a mistake." Emma blinked. "No," she said firmly. "You're my mom." The woman knelt slightly, careful with her balance. "My name is Lena," she said. "I'm not your mother. I don't know you." The words settled slowly. Emma's smile faltered. She looked at the woman more closely now, her expression shifting from certainty to confusion. Then her face crumpled. "I thought," Emma whispered, "I thought you came home." Her shoulders shook, and she began to cry, the sound sudden and raw. Daniel reached them and knelt beside her, pulling her gently into his arms. "It's okay," he murmured, holding her close. "It's okay." As he looked up, his gaze met Lena's face fully for the first time. The resemblance struck him like a physical blow. The same eyes, the same shape of the mouth, even the small mark near the eyebrow. For a moment, it felt as if the past had stepped forward and taken shape. Lena noticed his stare. Her expression tightened, color draining from her face. She took a step back, then another. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to upset her." Daniel shook his head. "It's not your fault." But Lena was already retreating. She turned and walked away, her pace hurried, shoulders hunched as if trying to disappear into the crowd. Daniel watched her go, 1,000 questions rising all at once. Emma clung to him, crying quietly now. Daniel held her, his eyes still fixed on the path where the woman had vanished. Something had been disturbed. Something he did not yet understand. Night settled quietly over the house, the kind of stillness that came only after a long day. The lights in the neighboring homes glowed softly through the windows, and somewhere down the street a car, door closed, followed by fading footsteps. Inside, everything was calm, almost too calm. Daniel paused in the hallway outside Emma's bedroom. The door was slightly open, a thin line of light spilling onto the floor. She should have been asleep by now. He knocked lightly and pushed the door wider. Emma was sitting on the windowsill, knees drawn up to her chest. She wore her pajamas, a soft blanket wrapped loosely around her shoulders. In her arms, she held a small stuffed bear, its fur worn thin in places, one ear slightly bent. Claire had given it to her years ago, on a birthday that felt impossibly distant now. Emma didn't turn right away. She was watching the street below, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. "You can't sleep?" Daniel asked gently. She shook her head without looking at him. "I tried." He crossed the room and sat on the edge of her bed. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed louder than usual, marking each second with quiet insistence. "Dad," Emma said finally. "Yes." She hugged the bear tighter. "When is Mom coming home?" The question hung in the air, fragile and familiar. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, feeling the weight of it settle over him. He had answered it so many times already, each time choosing the easier words, the softer truth. Tonight, they felt impossible to say again. Emma turned toward him at last. Her eyes were serious now, searching his face. "She's been in the hospital for a really long time," she continued. "Is she still very sick?" Daniel's hands clenched against his knees. He took a slow breath, then another, as if steadying himself before stepping off a ledge he could no longer avoid. "Emma," he said, his voice low, careful. "There's something I need to tell you." She waited, still and quiet. He reached out and brushed her hair back from her face, the same way Claire used to. "Your mom isn't sick anymore," he said. Emma's brow furrowed. "That's good," she said. "So she can come home?" Daniel swallowed. The words pressed against his chest, sharp and painful. "No," he said softly. "She can't." Emma stared at him, confusion flickering across her face. "Why not?" "Because," Daniel said, forcing himself to continue, "your mom died." The room seemed to go very still. Emma didn't cry right away. She just looked at him, her expression blank, as if she hadn't understood. "She died," she repeated. Daniel nodded, his vision blurring. "She did. A little while ago." Emma's hands loosened around the bear. It slipped from her lap and fell onto the floor, forgotten. She blinked once, then again. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. "She's not coming back," Daniel added quietly. "I should have told you sooner. I was afraid. I didn't want to hurt you." Her face crumpled then, suddenly like paper folding in on itself. A small sound escaped her, half breath, half sob. She slid off the windowsill and into his arms, burying her face against his chest. "I was waiting," she cried. "I was waiting for her." Daniel wrapped his arms around her, holding her as tightly as he dared. His own tears spilled freely now, soaking into her hair. He rested his chin against the top of her head, his shoulders shaking. "I know," he whispered. "I know. I'm so sorry." They stayed that way for a long time, the two of them clinging to each other in the quiet room. Emma's sobs gradually softened, fading into exhausted hiccups. Daniel rocked her gently, as if she were much younger, as if he could somehow undo what had already happened. When her breathing finally evened out, she didn't pull away. She stayed curled against him, eyes open but distant. "I miss her," she said softly. "So do I," Daniel replied. As he held his daughter, a sense of relief settled in alongside the pain. The truth was finally spoken. There would be no more lies. But beneath that relief, the grief felt sharper, more real than ever. And still, unbidden, another image rose in his mind. The woman in the park. Lena. Her face lingered there, unsettling and impossible to ignore, as if the past had not finished with him yet. Several days passed, each one blending quietly into the next. Life settled into a fragile routine again. Mornings were hurried, evenings subdued. Daniel focused on work during the day and on Emma at night, careful not to let his thoughts wander too far. Still, the image of the woman in the park surfaced again and again, uninvited, lingering in the back of his mind. Late one afternoon, as Daniel was finishing up at the office, his phone vibrated on the desk. He glanced at the screen. An unfamiliar number. For a moment, he considered letting it go to voicemail. Then something, an instinct he couldn't quite explain, made him answer. Hello. There was a brief pause on the other end, followed by a soft, hesitant voice. Hello. Is this Daniel Brooks? Yes, he said. Speaking. This is Lena, the voice continued. We met a few days ago. In the park. Daniel straightened in his chair. Yes, he said slowly. I remember. I'm sorry to call like this, Lena said quickly, as if afraid he might hang up. I wasn't sure if I should. You gave me your number, and I've been thinking about it ever since. Daniel glanced at the clock on the wall, then back to the phone. It's fine, he said. What's going on? I need to talk to you, Lena said. About that day. About everything. I wasn't honest with you. The words sent a quiet jolt through him. What do you mean? I lied, she said. Or at least, I didn't tell you the truth. And I think you deserve it. Daniel leaned back, his grip tightening around the phone. Are you saying you know my wife? Yes, Lena said. Her voice trembled. I do. Or I did. They agreed to meet later that evening at a small cafe downtown, a place Daniel knew well. It was quiet, tucked between older brick buildings, rarely crowded during the early hours. Somewhere neutral, somewhere safe. When Daniel arrived, Lena was already there, sitting at a table near the window. She stood when she saw him, her movements tentative. She wore the same modest clothes he remembered, a simple coat, worn shoes, her hair pulled back neatly. Up close, she looked even more tired than before, her face pale, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. They exchanged brief greetings and sat down. For a moment, neither spoke. Lena folded her hands together on the table, then unfolded them again. I didn't know how to tell you, she said finally. In the park. When your daughter called me her mother, I panicked. I didn't expect that. I didn't expect any of it. Daniel watched her, closely waiting. My name is Lena Brooks, she continued. And Claire. Claire was my sister. The words landed heavily between them. Daniel stared at her, certain he had misheard. Your sister. She nodded. My biological sister. That's not possible, he said automatically. Claire never mentioned having a sister. Not once. Lena's eyes filled with tears. I know. I didn't expect you to believe me right away. Daniel's thoughts raced. Memories replayed themselves, searching for gaps, for signs he might have missed. Why wouldn't you tell me? He asked, more to himself than to Lena. Lena opened her mouth to answer, then stopped. She took a breath, bracing herself. Before we go any further, she said quietly, can you tell me something? Yes. Why did your daughter think her mother was still alive? Daniel's chest tightened. He looked down at the table, then back at her. Because I didn't know how to tell her, he said. Claire passed away 2 months ago. Lena froze. For a moment, she didn't react at all. Then her face crumpled. She covered her mouth with one hand, a sob breaking free despite her effort to contain it. No, she whispered. No. Tears spilled over as the reality sank in. Lena bowed her head, her shoulders shaking as she cried quietly, the truth finally catching up to her in full. Lena took a long breath before she began. Her hands trembled slightly as they rested on the edge of the table, fingers interlaced as if to keep them steady. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear, carrying the weight of years she had never been able to put into words. She told Daniel about their childhood first, about a small, cramped apartment where money was always short and stability was something other families seemed to have but theirs never did. Their parents were not cruel, she said, but they were careless. Her father worked irregular jobs, whatever he could find, never staying anywhere long enough to build security. Her mother was often exhausted, overwhelmed, retreating into herself. There was food sometimes, laughter on rare good days, but more often there was shouting, silence, and uncertainty. They lived day to day. Bills went unpaid. Promises were made and forgotten. Emotional needs were overlooked simply because no one had the strength to notice them. Through it all, Claire had been Lena's anchor. She was older, Lena said, her voice tightening. Not by much, but enough. She took care of me when no one else did. Claire made sure Lena ate when there was food. She distracted her when their parents argued. She told her stories at night, whispering them under thin blankets, promising that one day things would be better. To Lena, Claire was not just a sister. She was safety. Then came the night everything ended. Their parents had gone out, leaving the girls alone. It wasn't unusual. Later, they were told there had been an accident. A car crash on a dark road. Their father had been driving. There was no long hospital vigil, no final goodbye. Death had been immediate. Lena remembered the police officers at the door. The way Claire's hand squeezed hers, so tightly it hurt. The way the apartment suddenly felt too large and too empty at the same time. Within days, they were placed into the foster system. The building they were taken to was gray and impersonal, filled with unfamiliar faces and rules they didn't understand. Lena clung to Claire constantly, afraid to let go even for a moment. Claire promised her again and again that they would stay together, that she would never leave her. For a while, it seemed possible. Then one afternoon a couple arrived, well-dressed, confident. They spoke quietly with the staff, asked questions, observed the children as if selecting something delicate and valuable. They were wealthy, Lena said, and particular. They wanted one child, a girl, preferably younger, someone who would fit neatly into their lives. They chose Claire. Lena watched as the adults spoke in hushed tones. She didn't understand everything that was said, but she understood the way Claire's face drained of color. Claire refused at first. She cried, begged them to take Lena too. She promised she would behave, promised anything they wanted. The answer never changed. The director of the facility eventually intervened. He pulled the sisters aside and spoke gently, reassuringly. He told them this was temporary, that Claire would go first and Lena would follow in a few months, that it was just a matter of paperwork, of adjustment. They lied, Lena said simply. Claire believed him. Lena wanted to believe him too. The day Claire left, Lena ran after her, crying so hard she could barely breathe. Claire was crying as well, shouting back that she would come back for her, that she would never forget her. The car drove away anyway. Weeks passed, then months. No one came for Lena. She waited by the window every day, convinced that any moment she would see Claire return. When that didn't happen, something inside her began to break. She stopped speaking much. She stopped eating properly. She slept poorly and cried often than not at all. Her body grew weak, her mind overwhelmed by the certainty that she had been abandoned. Eventually she became ill, not from a disease anyone could easily name, but from grief and shock that had nowhere to go. She was hospitalized, monitored, treated, but the doctors found no clear cause beyond emotional trauma. Lena lay in a hospital bed, staring at the wall, feeling hollow. That's when I realized, she said softly, that I was alone. Her voice faltered then, and she paused. pressing her lips together to steady herself. Daniel remained silent, listening, his chest tight as he imagined Claire as a frightened child, torn away, powerless to stop it. The separation had never healed. It had only grown deeper with time, turning into a wound that shaped everything Lena became. When she finally looked up again, her eyes were wet but resolute. "That's how we lost each other," she said. "Not because we wanted to. Because someone decided we were easier to manage apart." The cafe seemed quieter after that. The injustice of it hung in the air, heavy and unresolved. A past that could never be rewritten, only carried forward. Lena's life might have remained frozen in that hospital room if not for one quiet, ordinary woman who noticed her. Rose Turner was there because of her son. He was a few years older than Lena, recovering from a surgery that kept him in the pediatric ward longer than expected. Rose came every day. She arrived early, left late, and carried herself with the calm persistence of someone who did not know how to give up. At first, she paid Lena no special attention. She simply sat nearby, reading, knitting, sometimes humming softly while waiting. On the third day, Rose brought an extra apple. She placed it on the small table by Lena's bed without saying much. The next day it was a coloring book. The day after that, a small stuffed animal with crooked eyes and a stitched smile. Rose never asked questions. She never pushed. She spoke gently, as if Lena were something fragile that could shatter if handled too roughly. Over time, Lena began to respond, not with words at first, but with small gestures. She accepted the gifts. She turned her head when Rose spoke. She listened. One afternoon, Rose sat on the edge of the chair beside Lena's bed and said, "You don't have to talk if you don't want to. I'll sit here anyway." And she did. That consistency was what changed everything. When Lena was discharged, there was no family waiting for her. Rose was there instead. She spoke to the social worker, asked careful questions, filled out forms. It took time, paperwork, and difficult conversations, but Rose did not back down. She did not have much money. She worked long hours and lived modestly. Still, she insisted. "I can take care of her," she said. "She doesn't need much. Just someone who stays." Eventually, Lena went home with her. Life with Rose was not easy, but it was real. Their apartment was small. Winters were cold. Bills were paid carefully, sometimes late. Rose reused coats and wore the same shoes year after year. But Lena was fed. She was protected. She was loved without conditions or expectations. Rose's son became Lena's brother in every way that mattered. He teased her, defended her, shared his space and his life. For the first time since losing Claire, Lena felt anchored again. She grew up quickly. She learned to help, to work, to be responsible. She learned that love did not have to be loud to be dependable. When it came time to choose a path, Lena followed what she knew. She trained as a hospital aide, the same place where her life had once nearly stopped. It felt right to be there, helping others through pain she understood too well. By the time she was an adult, Rose's health began to change. At first it was fatigue, then weight loss, then pain Rose tried to hide. Lena begged her to see a doctor. Rose delayed, brushed it off, smiled through it. When the diagnosis finally came, it was cancer, advanced enough to be frightening, early enough to still fight. Lena worked more hours. She saved every dollar she could. She cooked, cleaned, managed medications. She refused to let Rose face it alone. Around that same time, Lena discovered she was pregnant. She told Kyle Anderson with shaking hands, hopeful despite everything. Kyle had promised a future. He had talked about marriage, about stability. The news changed him instantly. His face closed. His excuses came quickly. Within days, he stopped answering calls. Within weeks, he was gone. Lena did not chase him. She did not beg. She cried alone, late at night, sitting at the kitchen table with unpaid bills spread out before her. Her income barely covered rent, groceries, and Rose's medical expenses. The future felt impossibly narrow, filled with choices no one should have to make. Still, she kept going. She showed up to work. She showed up for Rose. She rested a hand over her growing belly and whispered promises she was not sure how she would keep. There was no drama in her strength, no speeches, no declarations, just quiet endurance. The world had taken much from Lena, but it had not taken her capacity to care. And even as her resources thinned and fear pressed closer, she held on to the one thing that had saved her before. She stayed. Daniel hesitated outside the bedroom door longer than he meant to. The room had remained untouched since Claire's death, preserved in a careful stillness that felt almost deliberate. He cleaned the rest of the house regularly, kept life moving for Emma's sake. But this room had become something else entirely. A boundary, a quiet agreement with his grief that some spaces were not ready to be entered yet. Lena stood a step behind him, hands folded at her sides. She did not rush him. She had learned long ago how to wait. "If you don't want to," she said softly, "I understand." Daniel shook his head. "No," he said. "It's time." He opened the door. The room smelled faintly of lavender, the same scent Claire had always preferred. Her clothes still hung neatly in the closet, arranged by color the way she liked them. A folded sweater rested on the chair near the window. The bed was made smooth and untouched, as if she might return any moment. Lena took a careful step inside. Her breath caught almost immediately. Everywhere she looked, she saw traces of her sister, the curve of a familiar smile frozen in a photograph. The same handwriting on a note pinned to the corkboard. Even the way the room felt, quiet but warm, seemed unmistakably Claire. On the desk, near the window, sat a small stack of books. Beneath them, partially hidden, was a worn notebook. Its cover was creased, the edges softened from years of use. Lena reached for it slowly, as if afraid it might disappear. "This," Daniel said quietly, "is her diary." Lena opened it with trembling hands. The first pages were dated years back, written in Claire's neat, careful script. She began to read, at first silently, then aloud in broken fragments as the words pulled her in. Claire wrote about her childhood, about foster care, about the day she had been adopted and the way her joy had been laced with terror. About Lena. "I think about her every day," Claire had written. "My little sister. I don't know where she is. I don't know if she hates me. I don't know if she's safe." Lena's breath shuddered. Page after page, the same theme returned. Guilt, regret, a promise never fulfilled. "I was supposed to protect her," Claire had written. "I believed them when they said she would follow me. I believed because I wanted to. And that belief cost her everything." Daniel moved closer, reading over Lena's shoulder. He had known Claire carried pain, but not this. Not like this. The entries continued, tracing Claire's attempts to search for her sister once she became an adult. Letters written and never answered. Visits to offices that offered no information. Doors closed by policy and time. "I feel like I am living a life that belongs to both of us," Claire had written, "and that makes it hard to breathe." Then the tone shifted. She wrote about Daniel, about meeting him, about how safe she felt with him, how he never asked questions she wasn't ready to answer, about how, for the first time, the weight she carried felt lighter. "I love him," she had written, "not because he saves me, but because he lets me be whole." And then there was Emma. The pages devoted to their daughter were filled with warmth and light. Claire described Emma's laugh, her stubborn streak, the way she held onto Claire's finger as if afraid to let go. "She is my heart," Claire had written. "Everything in me is hers." As Lena turned the pages, the handwriting began to change. The lines grew shakier, the entries shorter. Claire wrote about her heart condition returning after childbirth, about the exhaustion she tried to hide, the breathlessness she dismissed, the fear she refused to name out loud. I won't tell Daniel yet, she had written. He worries too much. I want Emma to have normal days. The final entries were the hardest to read. Claire wrote of knowing, deep down, that time was running out, of feeling her body weaken despite treatment, of lying awake at night, thinking not of death, but of unfinished promises. There is something I never touched, she had written. The inheritance my adoptive parents left me. Jewelry, accounts, things I never wanted. I kept them separate, untouched, because they were built on a choice that tore me from my sister. Lena's hands shook violently now. If I ever find Lena, Claire had written, everything I have left will be hers. Every dollar, every piece. It belongs to her. It always did. Daniel felt his throat tighten painfully. He had known nothing about this. Claire had never spoken of any inheritance, never hinted at it. She had carried it alone, just as she had carried everything else. The last entry was dated a month before her death. If you are reading this, Claire had written, then I am gone. Daniel, my love, please forgive me for the things I never said. Take care of Emma. Protect her. Let her grow without fear. And if fate ever brings my sister back to you, please give her what I could not. Give her the life I always wanted for her. Lena could not continue. She pressed the diary to her chest and broke down, sobs tearing through her with a force she could no longer contain. Daniel stood behind her, his own tears falling freely now. In that moment, he understood the depth of Claire's silence, the burden she had carried, the love she had poured into everyone else while asking nothing for herself. The room felt heavy with truth. This was what Claire had left behind. Not just memories, but a reckoning. Daniel did not hesitate. Once Claire's diary had been read, once her words were no longer ink on paper, but a living weight in the room, there was no decision to make. There was only responsibility and love carried forward. He told Lena that very night that he intended to honor Claire's wishes in full, not out of obligation, not out of guilt, but because it was right. Because this was what Claire had wanted when she was still breathing, still hoping, still believing that one day her sister would be found. They went together to the bank a few days later. Daniel handled the legal steps carefully, methodically, ensuring everything was done transparently and correctly. Accounts were accessed. Documents were reviewed. The inheritance Claire had deliberately left untouched was real, substantial and legally clear. When Daniel told Lena that it would all be transferred to her, she cried, not from relief but from grief. She kept saying Claire's name, over and over, as if only now fully understanding how deeply her sister had loved her, even from afar. Daniel also insisted on something else. Rose Turner's treatment could not wait. He arranged consultations with specialists, scheduled surgery at a major Portland hospital, and covered the costs without discussion or ceremony. Lena tried to protest once, quietly, her voice shaking. Daniel stopped her gently. This isn't charity, he said. This is family. The surgery was difficult. Recovery was long. There were nights filled with fear and exhaustion. But slowly, steadily, Rose began to improve. Follow-up tests brought cautious optimism. Then confirmation. Remission. When the doctor spoke the word, Rose closed her eyes and cried silently. Lena held her hand, unable to speak at all. For the first time in years, the future did not feel like something she had to brace against. Lena's pregnancy progressed under careful medical supervision. Daniel made sure she had the best care available, but he never hovered. He respected her strength, her independence. He supported without taking over. When the baby arrived, it was early morning, rain tapping softly against the hospital windows. The labor was long but uncomplicated. Lena held her son against her chest, exhausted and overwhelmed, tears slipping freely down her face. She named him Noah. Daniel was there later that day, standing awkwardly near the hospital bed, holding a bouquet Emma had insisted on choosing herself. Emma approached first, peering into the bassinet with solemn concentration. "He's tiny," she whispered. Lena smiled weakly. "He won't stay that way." Emma nodded, serious. Then she reached out one careful finger and let Noah wrap his hand around it. Something settled in her expression, something calm and sure. From that moment on, Emma claimed him. She helped whenever she could, fetching diapers, rocking the bassinet, announcing proudly to anyone who would listen that she had a baby cousin. She talked to Noah as if he understood everything, telling him about school, about the park, about her mom. Lena watched these moments with quiet awe. There was no replacement happening, no erasure, just connection, just care. Over time, routines formed naturally. Lena spent more time at Daniel's home, especially during Rose's recovery. Some nights she stayed over in the guest room, Noah sleeping nearby. Other times she returned to her apartment, needing space, needing to feel her own ground beneath her feet. There was no romance, no confusion, no cross lines. What grew instead was something steadier. Trust. Daniel helped with practical things, childcare schedules, paperwork, budgeting, always asking, never assuming. Lena contributed where she could, cooking meals, helping Emma with homework, bringing warmth into a house that had once felt hollow. Evenings became quieter. Laughter returned in small, unexpected moments. Emma slept better. Daniel slept better too, though he rarely admitted it. Claire was still present in the house, in photographs, in memory, in the way Emma sometimes spoke of her without sadness, just fact. Lena never tried to fill that space. She respected it, and Daniel noticed. This was not a story of rescue. It was a story of people choosing one another again and again, in ordinary ways, with steady hands and open hearts. Without realizing it, they had begun to heal. Kyle Anderson reappeared quietly at first. A message request on Lena's phone. A brief comment left unanswered. Then a bouquet delivered to the hospital where she worked, signed with a name she had not spoken aloud in years. Lena froze when she saw it. Her hands trembled as she set the flowers aside, pretending they meant nothing. Kyle did not stop. He began waiting near the entrance, after her shifts, leaning casually against his car as if time had never passed. He spoke softly, apologetically, telling her how much he had thought about her, about the mistake he had made, about how scared he had been back then. "I panicked," he said more than once, "but I'm ready now." Lena tried to keep her distance, but his words lodged themselves in places she had never fully healed. She was tired, she was vulnerable, and beneath everything else there was Noah. Kyle brought him up deliberately. "He's my son," he said one afternoon, his tone carefully neutral. "I have rights." The word landed like a threat. Rumors traveled quickly in a city like Portland. Kyle learned what he wanted to learn. That Lena no longer struggled the way she once had. That she lived differently now. That she was no longer alone. His apologies grew more polished. His persistence sharper. When Lena refused to meet him, he became insistent. When she blocked his number, he found other ways. Emails, messages through acquaintances, each one framed as concern, each one edged with entitlement. Confused and overwhelmed, Lena agreed to meet him once. Just once. She told herself it was for closure, for clarity. They chose a restaurant downtown, neutral ground, public, safe. Kyle arrived, dressed carefully, confidence restored. He complimented her appearance, commented on how well she looked, how motherhood suited her. He ordered wine without asking. As the evening went on, the mask slipped. He spoke about Noah as if the child already belonged to him, about how things would be easier now that Lena had resources, about how people like Daniel were temporary, convenient. "You didn't think I'd stay gone forever," Kyle said lightly. "I always come back to what's mine." Lena felt the air leave her lungs. She stood up, her voice calm but strained. This was a mistake. Kyle's expression hardened instantly. Outside, away from the noise and lights, his restraint vanished. He grabbed her arm, fingers digging in. His voice dropped, sharp and urgent. "You don't get to shut me out," he said. "You owe me." Lena tried to pull away. Panic rose fast and blinding. Daniel arrived without warning. He had followed at a distance, unease gnawing at him all evening. The moment he saw Kyle's hand on Lena, something inside him snapped. He crossed the street in seconds, pushing Kyle back with controlled force. "Let her go!" Daniel said, his voice low and unmistakably dangerous. Kyle scoffed, trying to laugh it off. "Who do you think you are?" Daniel stepped between them. "The man who won't let you touch her again." Kyle muttered threats as he retreated, but the bravado was gone. He walked away quickly, pride bruised, eyes burning with resentment. Lena stood shaking, tears streaming down her face. Daniel turned to her immediately, his expression softening. "You're safe," he said quietly. "I've got you." As he drove her home, the silence between them felt different, heavy, exposed. Daniel realized then what he had been avoiding for months. The jealousy, the fear, the truth. This was not just protectiveness. This was not obligation or loyalty to Claire. This was love. And for the first time since Claire's death, Daniel allowed himself to name it. Daniel did not speak right away. They sat in the car outside Lena's apartment, the engine off, the city quiet around them. Lena's hands were still trembling, slightly in her lap. Daniel watched her for a long moment, then reached over and covered her hand with his. "I need to say something," he said, "and I need to say it honestly." Lena looked at him, wary but attentive. "I love you," Daniel said. The words came out steady, without drama, not out of gratitude, not because of the past, and not because I'm trying to replace anyone. I love you because of who you are, because of how you care, because of the way you show up every day. Lena's breath caught. Tears welled in her eyes, but she shook her head slowly. "I love you too," she admitted. "But Claire," her voice broke. "She was my sister. She trusted you. I don't want to betray her." Daniel nodded. He had expected this. "Loving you doesn't erase her," he said gently. "Nothing ever could. Claire will always be part of this family, of Emma, of me. What we're choosing doesn't undo what she meant. It honors it." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "She wanted us to be happy. She wrote it herself. She didn't want guilt to decide our lives." Lena closed her eyes, the weight of years pressing in on her. When she opened them again, there was clarity there, fragile but real. "I don't want to live in fear anymore," she said, "or in debt to the past." Daniel squeezed her hand. "Then don't." That night, they slept in separate rooms, as they always had. But something had shifted. The air felt lighter, more truthful. In the early morning hours, they shared the same dream. Claire stood somewhere bright and open, her face peaceful, her smile familiar and warm. She looked at them not with sadness or accusation, but with relief, with gratitude. She lifted a hand in quiet approval, then faded gently as if her work was done. When Daniel and Lena told each other about it over coffee, neither of them questioned it. Some things did not need explanation. Life moved forward, not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily. Mornings became louder. Emma rushed through breakfast, complaining about being late for school. Noah cried from his crib. Someone always forgot something: shoes, homework, keys. There was laughter in the chaos, comfort in the repetition. Lena packed lunches. Daniel drove carpools. Emma read aloud at the table while rocking Noah's stroller with her foot. Rose visited often, healthier now, bringing food and unsolicited advice. The house felt full in a way it never had before. This was not a replacement family. It was a continuation. Claire was still there, in photographs, in stories, in the way Emma sometimes paused to say, "Mom would have liked this." No one corrected her. No one needed to. Love had not betrayed memory. It had made room for it. And in that shared space, between past and present, loss and renewal, they found something neither of them had dared hope for: belonging.